Up next, we have Infinity Pool. Infinity Pool is a recent release that came out in January. And you know what they say about January releases. They didn't have a lot of confidence, I guess, in this movie. But hey, a lot of people liked it. Look at that fresh tomato. And after taking a day or so to analyze the film and look at all the perspectives that people have for the film, perspectives that don't necessarily belong to me, to see how other people viewed the film and see why it's so liked or how it could be so divisive to other people, I can start to appreciate the points of view that these other people had for this film. I might not exactly share it, but I could appreciate the points of view that they had for this film. Infinity Pool stars Alexander Skarsgård, Mia Goth, Cleopatra Coleman, who's only in it for a very short time, and a bunch of other people, a bunch of extras. Terrifying, a mind-bending nightmare by, what is it called? Playlist. Yeah, a lot of people thought it was terrifying. A lot of people thought it was very gross out stuff. There's a lot of bodily fluids and things, but you can barely see it in some parts of the story. If you're bothered by some bodily fluids, viewer discretion is definitely heavily advised. When we look on the back here, we see that it was directed by Brandon Cronenberg. You can't actually see that. I can see that. Brandon Cronenberg is the son of David Cronenberg, the director, creator of plenty of classics that everybody loves, one of which that I have on Blu-ray that I don't feel like getting up out of this chair to go find. Shivers. Shivers, amongst many of other David Cronenberg classics, are excellently paced, roughly around 90 minutes. 90 minutes is the perfect time, perfect length for a movie that David Cronenberg would direct. It is the perfect length. Now, Infinity Pool is about 2 hours long. 2 hours long, about 118 minutes, so almost 2 hours. It feels a little bit longer than 2 hours at times. It feels like it stretches itself a little bit needlessly to me. It just stretches itself out a little bit, and you start to feel like you want it to get on. You want the scene to get on with it. You're lingering on shots. Maybe it's to establish character. Maybe it's to establish a certain tone that you're supposed to feel. And I could definitely see that in this film. It's a very uncomfortable film. There's not a lot of people that are likable, with the exception of Cleopatra Coleman, who does not stay in the film for that long. Everybody else, from the main character Alexander Skarsgård to Mia Goth, all of these guys are very unlikable characters, but at the same time, their performances, you cannot deny, are absolutely incredible. They transform themselves from excellent actors into disgusting, unlikable people in this film. The characters that they play are unlikable. You will not like these characters, but you will appreciate the actors' skill at their craft to transform themselves into such an unlikable creature. And Mia Goth especially transforms herself into something incredibly different to who she'd be in real life and all that stuff. That's what an actor does. But she transforms herself in this film. She is barely recognizable at certain times. She has an excellently believable, crazed, unhinged performance in this that just gradually goes from calm and reserved to completely unhinged near the end of the film. And if you appreciate that type of thing, you could appreciate the acting even if I personally didn't like the character. Which I don't think you're supposed to like the character, because the character is absolutely despicable. Alexander Skarsgård's character is absolutely despicable to me, and a little bit insulting on a personal level. Mainly, I'm not the biggest fan of the personality of this character, the way the character is written. It's not Alexander's fault, but the way the character was written, I get the point. I do. I get the point of why the character is written the way it was written. just on a personal level, it just didn't click with me. I didn't care for this character. I didn't feel for this character. When this character suffered, I did not sympathize or empathize with this character. When this character got angry, though, I kind of empathized with the character's angry, because Mia Goth's bullying of the Alexander Skarsgård character alongside her cronies does make you feel like you want Skarsgård to get revenge on these characters, but that never happens. He never gets revenge on the Mia Goth character. And let's talk about the context of why he would want revenge on the Mia Goth character. There's going to be some spoiling here, obviously. So we start on an island in the middle of nowhere, fictional country. I can't remember the name, La Tolka or something. And I don't know where that country would be, but it was filmed. The locations that this film filmed in were Croatia and Hungary, I believe. And somewhere else, I can't remember the third place, but it was Croatia and Hungary. And they're on a resort. Alexander Skarsgård and his wife, Cleopatra Coleman. The Cleopatra is a very rich heiress to a big shot, and Skarsgård is a failed writer. Skarsgård has written one book to his name, and it didn't do well. He has lost confidence in himself. He has lost all sorts of drive to do anything. He came out here to this location to find inspiration, to get away from the environment. And usually when you change your environment as a writer, you might find yourself inspired a little bit more, a little bit easier to focus. And that's usually what a lot of these stories tend to do with the character that's a writer. They tend to have them change locations to get inspired to do something. That's usually how it works. So that's what he's doing here. He's at this very expensive resort to try to get a different mindset to figure out what he wants to do. Because right now he feels pretty lost. He feels pretty lethargic. He's a very lethargically acted character. He lays around. He doesn't move a lot. He doesn't make a lot of effort to move a lot. He's very naive. He's very malleable. He's a very easily molded character because he doesn't necessarily know who he is or what he wants himself. And maybe it's because it kind of hits you can relate to them being an author, to them being a writer. Maybe it's because you could relate to that. But when Mia Goth finally goes off on him at the end of the third act, it really angers you. It really angers you, and he doesn't do anything to that. Now, let's talk about the Mia Goth character. Mia Goth is a character that comes here with her husband. Her husband's a very rich man. He's a big shot architect. And they're friends of these two other rich couples, a doctor couple and some other guy who might be a politician or something, I don't know. But they're big, rich people, so there's three couples, 6 people, very rich. They're a clique. 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 They're a clique. And they're all doing their own thing, and Mia Goth tries to rope Skarsgård into her little thing. And what's that thing? Well, they first invite him and his wife, Coleman, to go on a cookout of sorts out in the outside the resort boundaries. They're told they cannot leave the resort, but they do it anyway. They break the rules. And Mia Goth is flirting with Skarsgård. It's uncomfortable flirting. They're shot to be uncomfortable. It's not shot to be alluring. It's not shot to be sexual. It's shot to be uncomfortable. It's shot to be invasive. And it does do its work. It is not a comfortable shot, but they linger on it. It lingers on it a little bit too long for my taste. I don't think you needed to have changed the camera shot to see the stuff coming out and hitting the ground. I don't think they needed to show you that. But they do. They show you it. And so they all get drunk, as you do, and they have to drive back to the resort in the middle of the night, as you do. Maybe it's just me, but I wouldn't drink and drive. I don't care how many pals I'm with and how much everybody else is partying and drinking, I probably wouldn't be drinking, especially if I needed to be the one to drive back. But Skarsgård gets drunk, he gets in the car with the other drunk people, and he drives home. The headlights on the car start to fail. Instead of stopping the car like he probably should, he tinkers with the lights while slamming on the gas, driving faster. And then suddenly, out of the shadows is a walking pedestrian who could not hear the engine, apparently, and Skarsgård slams into the dude, and the dude goes ragdolling. And he does not get back up. Alexander Skarsgård is understandably freaking out about this. He is freaking out about potentially killing this person, and he ends up finding that he is dead. So he freaks out more, he throws up, and Mia Goth says, "Get into the car, we cannot stop here, the cops are evil out here, they're barbaric." So they drive home, and then the cops come to pick him up. And they say, "Our laws for blah 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 is execution, but since you're rich, we can get a double for you, and the double will pay for the crimes instead." And this is the part that checked me out of the movie. I was with the movie all the way up until this part. Once this part hit, I was checked out. And I don't think it ever really fully successfully pulled me back in. After this part, this little sci-fi, little meshamal, I was checked out. None of this feels believable. None of this feels like anything, because we learn multiple times throughout this film that this is a very poor country. It's a very poor country. And yet, they seem to have access to technology that not even the richest countries have even come close to accessing. Being cloning. They can clone a human being and create a 100% carbon copy. This clone has all of your memories. It has all... It thinks it's you all the way up to the point of that cloning. It looks like you physically, DNA, and anatomically, all of it. It is you through and through, a full-on clone. They can clone you. And so they claim that they're going to send the clone to death. But then, after this scene of the clone of Skarsgård being executed, and Skarsgård had to watch this happen, because that's part of the rules of the countries, that you have to watch your own execution. And while Coleman, who also had to watch, she was freaking out. Alexander seemed a little bit into it. He seemed a little bit into it. And I don't want to step outside the movie and give my own personal analysis to the character, but I'm going to do so anyways. I think it's because this dude feels like he's dead inside to begin with, and watching his own self die, so as to say, felt a little bit satisfying, because he was basically dead, a dead man walking as it is, alive but dead inside, if that makes sense. So watching this happen, it felt a little bit of a cathartic to him, and he felt a little bit into it. At least that's my own personal analysis on that. So he's into it. Coleman looked away. They go home, and Coleman accuses Alexander of being a little bit twisted for being into watching his own death, so as to say. And then he says he can't find his passport. He can't find his passport. She wants to leave immediately, and he can't find his passport. So he convinces her to leave without him while he goes to find his passport. We later learn that he intentionally hid his passport because he was into this thing, and he wants to see more of this type of reality. Mia Goth is already into this whole cloning thing. She is into watching herself die, because basically, if you have money, you can get away with any crime you want and just watch your clone be executed in your place. So you could essentially get away with murder if you had enough money. And I get the social satire here. It's social commentary on how the rich can get away with anything simply because they have money. And I understand that part of the social commentary, but what kept throwing me out of the movie, despite all of the social commentary, is the fact that a very poor country has access to technology that not even the richest countries have even could barely even dream of attaining. And yet these people, these extremely rich people who come here to watch their clones die, know about this technology, and yet they're not trying to maximize on it. They're not trying to, like, buy the island or steal the patent or learn how to clone people of their own accord. You know, that's the whole thing that I was zeroing in on, was the cloning thing. It's like, how did this island figure that out? That's what I want to know. The lore behind the cloning technology interested me far more than the social commentary. Like, who cares about the social commentary? Let them all do whatever. I want to know about the cloning. I want to know about this machine. Who made it? Who figured that out? And how is it on this poor island and not in some first world big shot land being maximized by war profiteers who want to create a clone army to fight their wars for them, and they have the governments pay them for clone soldiers to fight battles for them so that they don't have to send their own. You know, there's a lot of stuff you could think about with this cloning technology that kind of just takes you out of the movie. There's another film that I was reminded of while watching Infinity Pool, and it is called The Prestige. The Prestige is about two rival magicians. I don't remember their names, but they're played by Hugh Jackman and I think Christian Bale. Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. They're both excellent magicians, and they're rivals. They want to be better than the other. They keep trying to one-up the other. So Christian Bale has developed a magic trick that allows him to teleport. He enters a cabinet, and then he disappears from that cabinet, and there's another cabinet next to him on the screen, and he exits out that cabinet. And the Hugh Jackman character analyzes every single angle of Christian Bale's cabinet trick and cannot find out how he did it. He cannot find out how Christian Bale was basically able to teleport. I'm probably going to go find that DVD so you don't have to keep thinking of that. Yeah. There we go. So I can point at this movie while talking about this. So Hugh Jackman is analyzing Christian Bale's magic trick, and he cannot find out how he was able to do what he did. He couldn't figure that out. Oh, hold on, let me do this here. That's a little bit better. The glare was a little bit too bad on this side. Alright, so Hugh Jackman cannot figure out Christian Bale's trick. So he basically decides to one-up Christian Bale's trick. And he goes to this Tesla electric science man and says he wants to use science to combine it with his magic trick to literally teleport himself. So the electric Tesla man figures out how to do that by testing it with a hat. He puts a hat into a machine, he pushes a button, and the hat vanishes. And another hat shows up in a different location. And we later learn that the hat that teleported over here didn't actually teleport, it was actually cloned. So the hat vanishes from this location, another hat appears here, but then the hat that was right here teleports to a different location. And the first time Hugh Jackman tests this trick out on himself, he's the one that stays in the same location, and he sees himself teleport over here, and it's basically two Hugh Jackmans. So Hugh Jackman shoots the Hugh Jackman that appeared over here, and that Hugh Jackman dies. And then every time he repeats this trick, instead the Hugh Jackman that did not move that dies, and the teleported Hugh Jackman is the one that lives. Which means, regardless of which Hugh Jackman did what, the real Hugh Jackman is dead. The Hugh Jackman that lives is a clone. That's what I took from this movie, and they use that same prestige trick in this movie. And you can even see how the way that the the cover looks a little bit. It's a little bit prestige looking, right? You see how half the face is there, only half the face is shown here. That's kind of what I gathered here, that they were trying to pull a little bit of a prestige thing going on, where they might actually send the real person to be executed and the clone gets to live. That's one thing that you can probably take away from that. But I'm still focusing on how they were able to figure that machine out. This one at least explains that Hugh Jackman keeps the patent for this machine private. The creator of this machine, I believe, dies or something. I can't remember. It's been a few years. But there's nobody who knows about this machine. He tries his absolute utmost to keep the secret of this machine and the cloning process private from everybody, because it's part of his magic trick. And you can't reveal your secrets, after all. That's your whole biggest trade, right? And at the end of the film, he destroys the machine, and nobody else knows how this machine works except for Christian Bale. So he destroys the machine, and that's it. You can't recreate the cloning process. He has destroyed the patent, and there's nobody left alive, basically, who knows how to do this patent, to make this teleportation machine. In this, there's no such luck. There's no such aid for explaining this cloning machine. It's just there, and it's used as a plot point to do its social commentary of the rich getting away with murder, essentially. And that bothered me, because I kept focusing on the cloning machines. Like, how did you do that? But I tried to move past the cloning machine to the social commentary part. And we see that Skarsgård is very hesitant to fully engage in the psychotic behavior that Mia Goth is growingly showing with her cronies. And because he refuses to participate, Mia Goth becomes homicidal on Skarsgård's character. And then they eventually make Skarsgård kill a clone of himself. They make him kill his clone with his own bare hands. And Mia Goth says, now you have completed your transformation. You are now just like us, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of the vacation, Mia and her cronies do like a complete 180. It's like a switch from insanity to sanity. And they switch the sanity switch on. And everybody goes home and they're completely normal. They're dressed normal. They're acting normal. And Skarsgård is sitting in the back, completely broken, watching all of this stuff. And you could see the acting in his eyes. It is excellent. It's absolutely excellent. Despite how much I may disagree with the character and don't really care for the cast, the characters, not the cast, the actual people. You know, Mia Goth is excellent in this movie. Alexander Skarsgård is excellent in this movie. But they play characters that I don't like. That's what I'm trying to say here. Despite all of the characters being unlikable to me, despite having nobody in this film, with the exception of Cleopatra Coleman's character, to feel sorry for, to empathize with, to feel for, and Cleopatra's character leaves pretty early on, you're left with a bunch of despicable people doing despicable things, and you're just sitting there consuming the despicableness. And you just feel dirty watching it. You feel uncomfortable. And that's the point. It's the intention to make the viewer feel uncomfortable. But at the same time, this is probably not a film that I'm going to want to revisit without some reason to maybe just learn a little bit more about the film. See some things I may not have seen the first viewing. But otherwise, I'm probably not going to willingly search this film out. I'm probably not going to do that. It's not a bad movie. It is definitely worthy of that fresh marker. I'm going to probably give it two ratings. One is a personal rating for how much I personally enjoyed it, and one is the actual critique, the actual fair rating, the neutral rating without my personal bias sleeping in, at least as much as I could try to avoid that. My personal rating would probably be more of a 5 to 6 out of 10. It's a very average experience, mainly because I just didn't like the characters. I didn't care for the characters. I didn't care for the social commentary. And I didn't care for how poorly explained this cloning machine is. if anything, I'm curious about the world that they live in and how technologically advanced they might be. I'm curious about the patent for this cloning machine. I'm curious about how it's used. If all of these rich people come to this island and they're aware of this machine, how aware is the rest of the world of this machine? Is the rest of the world in like this future society? I don't know, and I'm very curious about that, but they hold all that information from you for this social satire part that I just couldn't pay attention to because I just didn't care. So personally, there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't like. But in regards to the filmmaking, the atmosphere, the acting, the actors are on their A game. They give 110%. They are 10 out of 10 performances across the board. It is a very well made movie. It is very well shot. There's a lot of interesting camera angles. There's a lot of interesting establishing shots. There's a lot of good sound. There's a good use of the background music to complement the scene. There's a lot of tones that the atmosphere itself, without anything else going on, just the atmosphere, the tone of the shot can make you feel emotions, can make you feel uncomfortable, can make you feel anxious, but yet at the same time it also offers a sense of serenity and enlightenment at the same time. There's a character journey going on with the Skarsgård character that is absolutely beautiful. But I just didn't care about the characters enough to appreciate that until after I had already watched it and thought about it overnight. And that's why my neutral rating, the unbiased rating, is probably going to be more like a 7 to an 8 out of 10, or a B. It is a very well put together movie, but I just cannot forgive the lack of explanation for this cloning machine. I just can't forgive it. It's too advanced for this time period, and it's too advanced to not explain it. You can't. Maybe that's the problem. A writing hole that was dug into when they made this cloning machine, and they realized they couldn't really explain it. So the best thing that they do is to just not explain it at all and let the viewer come to their own conclusions. And I could come to my own conclusions. I could come to 100 different conclusions on how this cloning machine was made and how this world is built, but I want to see that world. I want to see that world come in here. I don't want to imagine it in my head externally. I want to see this world that I know has good potential, that I know exists. I know the lore is there, but I want to see it. I want to see that world. I want to see the lore. I want to know about this cloning machine. I want to know how they're even able, how this third party poor country is very well established with this machine. I want to know about that. I want to see more about that. And of course the ending. We have to talk about the ending for the next few minutes. The ending of this movie feels like a cop-out, but it also feels like clickbaity sequel bait. That's it. It feels like sequel bait. Skarsgård does not leave at the end of the vacation when Mia Goth and the rest of her cronies leave the island to go back to their mundane life. The sanity switch, as I mentioned earlier, it could not be turned on for Skarsgård. He is reflecting on this whole entire vacation, and he has remained here on this island at the end of the film. It just ends. It goes to credits with him just standing there staring into the face of an oncoming storm. And I don't know about the actual filmmaker's intentions for that scene, but what I personally took away from that is that they're establishing that the character growth, the character journey of Alexander Skarsgård's character in this movie is not finished. They left the relationship between Mia and Alexander Skarsgård, and Alexander Skarsgård's relationship with his wife, Cleopatra Coleman's character. They left that stuff open. There's a lot of dynamics that haven't been fixed. There's a lot of plot points that haven't been solved. In fact, it actually opens up new plot points that they just don't finish. So you're left there wondering where this could go. Where is this going to go? Is this film going to get a sequel? Is Alexander Skarsgård going to turn into some sort of anti-hero? And the next year when Mia Goth and her cronies come in, is he going to get his revenge on Mia Goth and her cronies to basically take back the island from these rich people that are using this place as their very own purge playground? Is that going to happen, or is he going to turn even evil? He's going to go even eviler than Mia Goth's character. Is he going to do that? We don't know. I think it's the former. I think he's going to get revenge on Mia Goth and her cronies for what they did to him during the events of this movie. But I don't know. It just ends in a very unsatisfying way that feels like it might be satisfying if it's building up to a sequel. But if there's no sequel that ever comes, then I'm going to hold by my statement that this is a very dissatisfying ending, because there's a lot of plot points that just don't get resolved. There's a lot more room for a sequel in this film than I've seen in a lot of these types of films. There's a good example is The Menu. The Menu ends definitively. There's no room for a sequel. But there could be one, but there's no room for it, essentially. All of the character plot lines are solved. All of the plot lines that are built and opened through the film are closed at the end of the film. In this, all of the plot lines and character dynamics that are opened in the film, a lot of them remain open at the end of the film, which means that there is room for these dynamics to continue into a sequel to close those dynamics, so as to say. I would say that this is a very satisfying film depending upon your own personal bias, but it is a very well put together film despite my bias. I would say that it is a very good quality made movie. The only reason I would give it such a low personal score is for my own personal enjoyment. But in regards to how well put together it is, how well shot it is, how well acted it is, how well the sound is, how well the music is, and how well the colored lenses and all the seizure producing that middle second act scene in particular, there's a lot of stuff in here that's really well made. But it very much relies on your own subjective viewpoint, your own subjective willingness to enjoy it or not, if that makes sense. It is a very complicated movie to definitively pick a team on whether you like it or dislike it. And it is most especially a watchable movie because I want you to formulate your own opinion on Infinity Pool.